Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Chess Olympiad 2024 edition. This is round number 7, and in this round, something absolutely massive happened, and I'm going to share it with all of you. This was a very big round with some very, very big games. The storyline continues to be, how does Magnus Carlsen fare in classical chess, and is he bored of beating everybody already? But the bigger story is Gukesh from India. This round, India was playing China. It's a huge game for the gold medal match because they're both really, really stacked teams. And we were expecting Gukesh to play Ding Liren. And at the time of recording this video, they're playing a world championship match against each other 2 months from now. Ding, Gukesh, a preview of that match. And Ding sat out. That's a huge deal. It's saying a lot without saying a lot, and a lot of top players weighed in on this, and that seems to be the consensus. It is unthinkable, unimaginable, that two people have to play a world championship match against each other 2 months from the time of this video, and whatever happened in that match happened in that match. Maybe Ding won anyway. Maybe Gukesh won. All right? Maybe I won. But Ding did not show up today to play for China. Instead, Wei Yi, who is in better form, who is 30 points higher rated right now than Gukesh, rather than Ding, he showed up to play for China, and Ding got some rest. And that is a wild story. Now, I gotta go. Not right now, but I gotta go. And normally these recaps take about 30 to 35 minutes. I'm gonna speak really fast today. I'm gonna try to get this done in around 27. So buckle up, all right? Fasten your seatbelts. We are going to kick things off, not with Magnus Carlsen. We are going to kick things off for the first time in a minute with Gukesh. This is a huge matchup. Gukesh, 27-64. Right now, unofficially, he's like 27-75. Playing Wei Yi, 27-62. These guys played against each other earlier this year in Tata Steel in the tournament in the Netherlands. Let's begin the game. We have E4 and we have C5 from Wei Yi, who's clearly playing for a win. He is not playing for a draw. He does not play E4, E5. C5, knight F3, D6, and Gukesh plays a sideline. He plays knight C3. Normally, white here is playing for D4, and it's probably going to be a Knight Orf Sicilian by Wei Yi. Instead, we get knight C3, knight F6, and bishop to E2. This is a monumental sideline. Essentially, white wants black to commit something, and then after castling, you then want to play D4. But now black plays E5. Black says you cannot play D4. However, we're going to get into a long strategic game because I'm also giving you the light squares, which is why Gukesh now plays bishop C4. And you cannot bring the pawn back. The best move in this position for black would be E5 to E6. Unfortunately, then you would be kicked out of the tournament. So bishop to E7, D3, knight C6, and Gukesh plays bishop G5. The idea is very easy. He wants to take the knight. Normally, this is a very bad decision. You never want to give away a bishop for a knight, like for absolutely no reason, but you would get a lot of control of the light squares in the center, which the opponent, because he wanted to stop you from getting what you wanted, the opponent kind of allowed that positional situation. So we have castles, bishop F6 from Gukesh, bishop F6, and the knight goes to D5. Wei Yi plays bishop to E6. He spends a lot of time. He was probably contemplating rook B8 and B5, or A6 and B5, or knight A5, or moving the bishop somewhere, or even king H8 in some positions. And, you know, the idea of king H8 in a nutshell is something like this, where then black will play F5 and move the bishop out of the way of getting captured. But he plays bishop to E6, and Gukesh plays queen D2, keeping his options to castle flexible, maybe flexing that he wants to castle the queen side. And now we have A6. A6 is preparing B5, and obviously now castling this way doesn't make a whole lot of sense because this isn't coming. He doesn't commit A4, and instead Gukesh castles kingside. And Gukesh at this point has built up a very big advantage. 33 minutes on the clock. Clearly a degree of comfort demonstrated by the white side. But okay, castles, and now we have this move B5, bishop B3, the king slides out of the way. That happens when you want to get off the diagonal. You'll notice that white's light squared bishop is on the same diagonal as black's king, so he slid it out of the way. A3, rook B8. We make a couple more preparatory pawn moves, just very slow, very timid game, kind of like two fighters feeling each other out. Here's F5. This is the moment the game is supposed to shift. You will notice that Gukesh never took back the bishop. So black has the bishop pair, black is getting the initiative, black is going to create some sort of kingside attack, and Gukesh plays knight G5 and bishop G8, and he's worse. He has misplayed the position. All right? He's misplayed. Black got the bishops out of the way. Black is going to be launching a very swift counterattack in a moment. Gukesh takes on F5. We have gf5, and he plays the best move, which is f4, but counterintuitively, he's opening the position for the bishops, which should not be good, but it's very, very tense. Now, black has many options here, like c4, like h6, like knight a5. He thinks, and he plays c4. It's 14 minutes to 18 minutes. Both guys have to make 21 more moves, or they lose the game. Gukesh plays dc4, bc4. You may be wondering, isn't this just a free pawn on c4? Like, why would he go c4? Yes, that's the point. You're giving your opponent the pawn. But now what you're doing is you're applying pressure on this side of the board. Now, what you're supposed to play here with black is knight a5. Okay, the bishop is going to move. Now you go to b3. You fork, bishop b3, rook b3. And what black wants to do here is continue the attack, continue the initiative. I think Wei Yi wanted to go for this, but first he wanted to take on f4. Taking on f4, opening his dark-squared bishop, is a mistake because of the knight coming back to f3, and actually black's structure is not great. And now he goes for this plan with bishop a2, knight b3, but now it's worse. Now it's simply worse. The knight is better off on f3, and this pawn is simply weak. And if Gukesh here plays the very mysterious move, rook to f2, simply defending his pawn and then defending his knight, apparently he's got a big advantage. After bishop d5, queen b6, pinning this guy, all right, and putting some pressure, and white just very simply retreats the queen, and black doesn't have anything. Black can apply some pressure here on b2, but you counterattack straight down the middle. Obviously, if you play passive defense, you're still maybe doing well, but you attack straight down the middle, and Gukesh here would have realized black's got a bunch of pawn weaknesses and no play. He's got doubled isolated pawns, and every other pawn is isolated. This is miserable for black, but Gukesh is also human, and he takes back on f4 instead, which leads the players to a position where everything falls off the board. a5, rook d8, bishop takes c3, and the knight gallops in to attack the king. Both guys have 5 minutes on the clock. Check here, rook d1. You may be wondering, wait a minute, knight d5, what is happening? Isn't this bishop under? Yes, and knight e7 is a massive threat. Knight e7, rook g8 is mate, the bishop is hanging. So it's a fork of 2 spots, which means Wei Yi has to play rook d1 and enter this very, very tough endgame. It's rook versus 2 knights, which is a draw. 2 knights versus a king is a draw. If white loses all 3 pawns and black loses all 3 pawns and the rook, it's a draw. You cannot mate with 2 knights. It's not possible. Rook c1 by force. I mean, if the opponent wants to lose, they can lose. If you want to lose, you can always lose. You can click the resign button. Knight b5. And now we begin the second time control, right? We get to the 40th move, 25 minutes and 27 minutes, and this is the endgame. The one benefit for white is that he's got better pawn structure and black has some weaknesses, and for black, it's the fact that he has a rook. I mean, these knights are not particularly good. They are very slow, and they constantly have to rely on each other. So the players shuffle around. Gukesh tries to create a little bit of a structure, but how on earth is he going to break through this position? I mean, it doesn't look possible. Knight g1, he doesn't repeat, he kicks the king out, but suddenly there's questions about the pawn on a5. How will you defend it? Rook b1. I mean, it's not, there's no way Gukesh can defend an attack at the same time here. But again, we're going to get low on time. Look at this. Both guys 3 minutes. Now it's a blitz game. It's a blitz game with 2 knights. I mean, it's miserable. Knight e2, f4. The rook is low-key trapped on the edge of the board. I think he should have gone rook h1 here. Instead, he plays f4, which is the best move. And the position gets insanely complicated. G4, rook h4. Wei Yi looking to win. Gukesh looking to win. So Wei Yi probably could have just kept shuffling. And I doubt the knights could have done anything, but it's very tense. Rook down to h1, f5, they're pushing. h5 is apparently a mistake. Why is it a mistake? Well, not because of that move, it was because of knight g3, which wasn't really a fork because black would have gone here and taken, but that's the point. Knight c3, h4, knight e4, both guys with no time remaining on the clock, but Gukesh is maybe winning. And here, rook d1 is the only way to draw, and then you have to play h3, and then you have some moves, and then you can get the king to the e7 square when I push on f7. You have to start with rook d1. Wei Yi starts with the wrong move. Now we have f7. Now, rook d1 doesn't work because king e2 is with the tempo. Rook f1, knight g5, h2, knight f3, you steal the deal, but there's king e7. Wait, but you can take on h2. He takes on h2. The rook goes here. But how are you going to get rid of the blockade? Rook a3. King d2 is the best move. Why king d2? Because if king c2 and the rook comes in, that's incorrect. What you need is the king on d2, because after rook a4 and knight to h6, whenever the rook is coming to d4 or anywhere else, the king has to run this way. So in this position, rook a3, you could not go to e2. Why can you not go to e2? Because in this position, black will take, and if you play knight h6, rook e4. So the king has to go that way, but stay on d2, so e4 is not a fork. Gukesh plays this move in 29 seconds. He gallops to the other edge of the board. Knight g6, f8 is unstoppable. It's coming down to the last pawn. And Gukesh clutches it out in 80 moves and ironically puts his king on the central square. I mean, you talk about an anime. In chess, when black resigns, the players put the kings in the center to indicate to the digital board what the result is. If white wins, the kings go on the light squares, opposite each other. If black wins, they go on the dark squares. The final move of the game, Gukesh puts the king on the winning square. So when the players put the kings in the center, he doesn't even have to do anything with it. It's already on the spot. It returned to the winning square on the winning move of the game. 2780 is now the rating of Gukesh after this game. Number 5 in the world. You know who's number 4? Erigaisi, his freaking teammate. This is the clutch victory. The rest of the games were drawn. And even though they brought in Wei Yi, 2762, 40 points higher rated than Ding Liren, unfortunately for them, nobody can stop Gukesh right now. If Gukesh can play like this type of fighting spirit and tenacity, the World Championship match may not be as close as we want. We gotta see a resurgence from Ding Liren. I am stunned that they did not play today. Now I've got some more games for you. Magnus Carlsen with the black pieces. We have Norway versus Austria. The board one for Austria is Valentin Dragnev, who I've played online a few times, I think. He also, I think, makes some content. I also think he biked to the venue from Austria, like on a bike. So e4, and Magnus plays something that I don't think I've seen him play much of. One thing I like to do when Magnus plays an opening is I like to go to chessgames.com, and then I like to search player, right? And then I search the name, and then I say the opening, Philidor. Magnus Carlsen has played the Philidor 7 times, including today. The last time he played the Philidor was 2020 in online events, and 2020 in a blitz game, and in 2011. So he plays d6, and then he plays e5. The freaking Philidor defense. That's literally PH, freaking Philidor. And what's funny about this opening is that you can take the pawn and trade the queens. And I mean, black's play is like low-key very annoying. Okay, there's like bishop c4 lines. Black can play bishop b4, or black can play king e8. You can, bishop e6 is quite bad because you just suffer with this for the rest of the game. But yeah, if Valentin wanted, he could have made this very boring for Magnus. He could have traded the queens. And actually, sometimes that's why black starts with this, so that e5, there's no longer de. The problem with knight bd7 is there's f4 and g4, g5 ideas. So, but okay, we have e5. He plays knight f3, knight bd7. Somehow Valentin just played very quickly. Maybe he expected it. I have no idea. Bishop e7. And this is the way the modern Philidor gets played. Black plays c6. And now, back in the day, they used to play b6 and bishop b7 and so on. Nowadays, black plays h6, and then black plays rook e8. And white has really like one main line. White's main line is rook e1. Now, you may be wondering, what's the point of these moves? a4 stops b5, and also the bishop can go to a2. Rook e1 supports the center, and also the bishop can go to f1. I mean, it's just a beneficial move to play rook e1. Now, Valentin plays bishop e3. I've not seen this move order, to be honest with you. Bishop e3 also, as far as I'm looking, allows knight takes e4. Knight e4, d5. This is called a central pawn trick. It's not obviously the best move, but like, I've never seen bishop e3. And I mean, if you check the opening database here, I don't think it's like a huge significance bishop e3 or rook e1. I just thought it's kind of automatic people play. So I have to take a look at this. I've never seen it, right? So bishop e3. Now, generally, black will take on d4 here, or black will play rook e8. Magnus plays rook e8. Valentin plays a5, suppressing some space on the queen side, disallowing some pieces to move there. and now kind of forcing black into a decision. Black takes on d4, white takes with the queen. Okay, so he spends some time, he takes with the queen. I think bishop d4 is generally what you do here. Bishop d4, let's say bishop to f8, attacking this pawn. Now white plays rook e1, and this position has been seen in the database. b5, ab, knight b6, bishop b3, bishop e6, bishop e6, rook e6. This position has been reached in the database a few times, and it's, white is continuing to try to find an advantage, and black is equalizing, and the game is, dynamic and interesting. But queen d4, that's an interesting move. Magnus still plays the bishop to f8, and black is ready to spring out, right? Or put the knight in the center. Those are the ideas of the Philidor. Rook e1, okay. Magnus plays queen c7. It's a bit of a waiting move. So he's not playing b5 or knight e5, which might very well be the best moves according to the engine, but he plays queen c7. White plays bishop f4, very natural. Black puts the knight in the center. And now bishop e2 and bishop d7. It's a very tense game. So how are you going to break through this position if your opponent is the best player of all time? Well, you can play rook d1, but if you start with rook d1, which looks natural, a5 is just hanging. So you can't do that. That's kind of the responsibility you bear going here. If you try to get rid of your weakness, black is not going to take. Black will play b6 or b5. Probably b5, but b6 is also okay. But b5 is actually better. Okay, so you can't do that. What about rook e d1? That's actually the best move, but it's not really clear what the next move is. Because black wants c5. Once the queen moves, black wants to maneuver the knight, bring the rook, and be happy. By the way, knight c6 still attacks a5. Sorry. Not knight c6, knight g6. What am I? Knight c6. I was saying bishop c6, right, with some pressure. Knight c6 hangs something very funny, which is bishop d6, and knight b5. Also, queen c5 take and bishop c7. So you got to be a little careful the way you do this. Knight g6 or bishop c6. White goes here. Black goes a6. And after a6, preventing various, things, knight d2 with the idea of playing f4 is very annoying for white. For black. For white. For black. Not for white. It's fantastic. All right? Knight d2, f4. I'm very curious what Magnus was planning here. Maybe he was planning c5, right? And probably bishop c6, and then f4. He was probably trying to move the knight, and it's very tense. I mean, it's a very, very tense position. But white goes here, and that is a first step in the wrong direction. Then white trades on e5, and Magnus takes with the rook. And this, I think, was the first moment that white kind of was like, wait, he's just letting me open up the king, and kind of believed him. But in reality, this is a kind of a questionable decision. Yes, like white went bishop f4, bishop blah, 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 blah. White spent a bunch of moves. The computer really likes the position for white. I think the problem is the a-pawn. I think probably Dragnev was like, my pawn's weak. Magnus is going to go here and here. It's very easy to look at this position and be like, oh my God, right? What am I doing? I get it. I get it. So instead of taking on f6, he goes b4 to defend his pawn. But unfortunately here, again, being like, being baited, being egged on to play bishop takes f6. He's like, take it. Magnus is like, go ahead, take the knight. I mean, you put the bishop there, dude. You want to take it, but Dragnev doesn't. And he goes back. And, the suspense is kind of ruined by the game review. But, you play this move because you're like, the rook's got to go somewhere. And here Magnus sacrificed his rook. Now, not right away, right? Not right away, because of course his queen's hanging, right? But queen d1. And you could have taken on c5. It didn't really matter. If you took on c5, actually, rook c5 with a juggernaut down the c file is really nasty. But after queen d1, just cb4. And this rook is here to perish. It does. But Magnus wanted this because he knew when the position cleared out, he was going to take and go here. And even though white is up material, white is up a full point. White has a rook for a bishop and a pawn. It is -2 for black. Not only is black already down 1 point, according to the evaluation, it's -2 even more. So black is completely winning. And black is completely winning because white is not equipped to defend the king. This bishop has no forward movement. Can't go anywhere. Bishop c5 is on the way. Queen f4 is on the way. These pawns are actually liabilities. c2 is a liability. And yeah, Magnus just, look at this, shellacking the pieces around. Bishop h5. Actually, here the best move is rook d8. He goes rook c8 and actually allows a little bit of sign of life here. Rook d8 would have stopped d6 because even though white can give this up and you have some queen d5 ideas, black always is in time with counterplay. Whereas after rook c8 d6, taking on with the bishop is now a lot harder because queen d5, there's pressure here. Magnus goes here. c3 is an interesting move, but actually queen d2 and rook d1. Just queen d2 and rook d1 would have been the way. White goes here, and yeah, after c3, unfortunately, it's just not good enough. You queen b3 check, queen c4, and the queen comes back. You pick this up, and black's attack is faster. Black's pawns are faster. White's king is not safe. c2, paralyzing the rooks. Now, white is getting a bit... White is close. He's kind of close, but the dark square blockade is a bit too strong. And now you have to give this up. And that's it. That's the end of the game. Queen e3, queen d1. Absolutely brutal move, trapping the rook. a7, queen c1. And this is very nice. Here, white resigned because obviously queen f1 is a huge threat. If you queen, it's queen f1, king h2. It's like, where's the mate? Well, there's just no mate. I just make another queen. I have another pawn there. And that is the end of the game. Norway ended up beating Austria. A very nice game from Magnus, but I do wonder, Dragnev kind of hesitated. He was shuffling the bishop around, and he had a moment here. He could have taken on f6. And right here, there was this moment where he could have maybe gone for this knight d2 f4 idea. Would have put some more pressure on the black position, but he puts the bishop on h4. And that's life. It's a game of decisions, and Magnus plays a freaking Philidor for the 7th time in his entire life, and he's played hundreds of thousands, if not millions of games. So fascinating stuff all around. Norway still in some contention, maybe for a silver or a bronze. I doubt for a gold. Now, speaking also of India, we looked at Gukesh. Look, I'm just going to say this right now. Everybody in the women's side is playing for a medal that is not the gold one. There was a Grunfeld in this game between Georgia and India. It was a very complicated battle. We got multiple hanging queens in the early game. I do have to speed up here because I actually have to leave the house or I'm going to be late, and it's not good. I told you this already. So I will be doing a faster replay. In this game, Vaishali got out of the opening with a 6-pawn endgame, but white has the worst structure, and if black can land a knight on the dark squares like e5, g5, bring in the king, and dominate the d-file, watch how she plays this game. b5, c4, creating a wall. Now the light-squared bishop can't re-enter the game. Now she plays f5, so double wing attack. Pawn takes f5 is a bad move, not because of rook d1, but actually because of knight d5, and white has too many weaknesses. But even if you play rook d1, ultimately it was her who was still applying the pressure. It was dicey for a second, but it was difficult to defend, and I feel like white just thought they were never going to reactivate the bishop. Rook d3 is a beautiful finishing touch. Look at how brutal this move is. It's attacking the pawn, and you can't take because neither piece can stop the pawn. I mean, have you ever seen a position like this? King and a rook, and they're both walled in. They're both walled in. The king is walled in. The rook is walled in. There's no moves. Rook d3 is a beautiful move, and she then repeated instead of taking on c3, which is crazy. I guess she was worried about something. She was worried probably about takes, and here she played like an exceptional move, but then it was crazy. Then she re-trapped and then got the pawn, but ultimately she found her way, and it almost felt like both sides at some point were trying to surprise the other with their moves, but she picked up the bishop and she picked up the pawn, and this is a winning endgame because the c-pawn survives, and India is still undefeated. So the Indian women's team is absolutely cooking at the Olympiad. Everybody else is playing for another medal. In the matchup between Hungary and Lithuania, Lithuania has had a fascinating start to the Olympiad. Peter Leko is a legend of the game. I mean, this man was an absolute monster in the early 2000s and the 90s. He was so good. Elite challenger to the championships. He plays a Rossalimo in this game. And all I'm going to say about this game is watch the class. Create some structural problems for black. He plays d3, knight c3, and castles. And already from the opening, black is in trouble. Clearly a line that black had not really been prepared for. takes, and b3. He plays knight e7, and then he plays d6, which is wrong. The way you play here is you actually have to go for f6, counterattacking, and the center, because if white goes for e5, you go here. That is the way you try to fight back against the center. One small inaccuracy early in the game, creating this structure, and then it was just all Leko, demonstrating beautiful positional understanding. Black looking for counterplay, but his center gets closed. Rook e1, and he can't get out. He tries to bust out of the position by playing like this. Peter Leko's like, he's got a castle, right? How's he going to castle? I got bishop a3 incoming. How is that going to happen? And that's it. Peter absolutely carves up Poltinivicius, who tries to castle, but he castles directly into the other side of the board, and it takes just 23 moves. Peter Leko turning back the clock. Absolutely dominant performance. Hungary still in a chase for a podium finish. And you know who else is in a chase for a podium finish? The team from Iran. These guys are on fire. This round, they had a very close match with Vietnam. Vietnam's been also unbelievable, but on board 4, Vietnam fields a 24-25 FIDE Master. Not even an IM or a GM. Now listen, FIDE Masters are stronger than IMs, and some GMs even too. Clearly this player is stronger than me, but it's going to be tough. I mean, your opponent's a 2600 very experienced Grandmaster, and even though you can play a London, and you can keep it solid, and clearly the match strategy was play an opening that's going to frustrate my opponent, who at some point is going to have to take some risk. How on earth is Black ever supposed to win this position? He's going to have to take risk. Look at him taking risk. This is very calculated. He's getting attacked on purpose. He's trying to get his opponent to come at him and put a fight on. Look at that. I mean, White's got a monster attack brewing here. And he takes, keeps attacking, but Black knows it's a matter of, look at the time span. White is getting a little bit nervous on the clock, like, I've got to play for a win, so I am playing for a win. But at some point, Black is going to take over, sacrifices a pawn, plays f5, lashing out. It's 35-10. This is expertly handled by the Iranian Grandmaster, and suddenly this happens. And this is brutal because the rook has to retreat. e5 is not the best. Rook f3 is even better, but that's an engine move. And Puya Idani here brings all the pieces forward. And I mean, like, this is bad. It's like White castled and the rook fell asleep. White never, it was a glitch. Unfortunately, it's not a glitch. And Puya Idani cleans up, and Iran is the only team that can beat India. They are playing India in the next round, in round 8. It's 14 points for India, who's 7-0, and 13 points for Iran, who have won every single game so far, and they've made one draw. So Iran-India, massive matchup. Probably the winner of that matchup will win the entire thing. So it's going to be Gukesh versus Parham. It's going to be Erigaisi versus Tabatabe. It's a crazy matchup. Can't wait to cover it. We covered the recap. Now I got to go. Hope you appreciated the coverage. Thank you all so much. Gukesh is a monster. Get out of here.